Be me. 34. Self-made entrepreneur. Built my career from scratch. Started out in warehouses running night shifts, lifting boxes heavier than I was. I've sat in too many boardrooms full of men who thought I didn't belong. Heard every excuse. Too emotional, too soft, too distracted. Decided I wasn't just going to compete with them. I was going to prove them obsolete. I've always believed women can run the world if they're given the chance. Men act like they're natural leaders, but half the time they can't even focus if a pretty girl walks in the room. I don't need that. I want to build something different, something better. That's how I ended up here. CEO of a logistics company. The kind of industry people say only men can handle. Heavy freight, deadlines, stress, perfect battlefield to prove them wrong. And I did it my way. All women staff, no exceptions. I built my team from scratch, handpicking women who'd been overlooked everywhere else. Some of them fresh out of trucking school, licenses still warm, like Rachel, who told me she'd been laughed out of 2 interview rooms because women can't handle 18-wheelers. Others have been dispatch assistants or warehouse clerks for years, always told they'd never handle the big stuff, like Alicia, who knew every back road in the state, but was stuck making coffee runs at her last job. Then there was Marcy, the quiet one, who'd spent 5 years in a warehouse while men half her size got promoted over her. Training days were long, certifications cost a fortune, but watching them line up in uniform felt like proof we were making the rules. I gave them the chance no man ever would, and they jumped at it. We've only been running for about 3 months, but already I feel unstoppable. Contracts lined up, investors circling, articles calling me the face of feminist logistics. Our office walls still smell like fresh paint, but I tell people we're rewriting history. It feels good, like I finally built the fortress I'd always dreamed of. Of course, there are hiccups. A few deliveries late last month. A truck broke down outside Dallas. Warehouse overtime cost higher than planned. But that's normal, right? Every startup bleeds a little at the start. I brushed it off with the same line. New company, new systems. We're still streamlining. Said it enough times I almost believed it myself. Besides, men screw up businesses all the time, and nobody bats an eye. Why should our mistakes mean more? Every day, a few of the women even came up to me after saying how empowering it felt to work somewhere men weren't breathing down their necks. One hugged me, whispered that she finally felt safe in a job for the first time in her life. Moments like that reminded me why this was all worth it. Cracks or no cracks, we were building something history would never forget. This week I'm at the Women in Business Expo, standing on stage under the bright lights, smiling into the mic, telling the audience how I built a logistics company run entirely by women. No men, no exceptions, and we're thriving. They cheer. Some women actually stand up and clap. I swear I can see tears in a few eyes, like my company is proof their dreams can survive too. Afterwards, I work the room, shaking hands, giving interviews. Then one reporter grinned a little too wide and said, "You know, the only reason investors lined up so fast was because of the all-women angle, right? If this had been a regular logistics startup, nobody would have cared." I froze for half a second, smile glued tight on my face. Inside, I was boiling. I wanted to scream that funding came because I earned it, because I built this from sweat and steel, not because of some PR gimmick. Just ignored him and said, "Next." Right after I see him, Marcus, my former operations consultant. I hired him briefly when we first launched. Truth is, the investors insisted on it. Marcus had 20 years in freight and warehouse ops. He knew routes, weights, and deadlines in his sleep. The kind of precision you can't fake. I kept him around just long enough to set up routes and schedules, then push him aside once my women were licensed and the system was running. Officially, he was off payroll, but I knew the investors still leaned on him in the background. I hated that. Hated knowing they thought I needed a man as backup. So, I ignored his emails and told myself we'd manage without him. He's standing off to the side of the expo hall. No badge, no smile, just watching me work the crowd. When I finally walk over, he greets me like no time has passed. "Congratulations. Looks like you've built something real." His voice is calm, steady, annoyingly grounded, the opposite of the champagne buzz in my chest. I thank him maybe a little too sharply. But then he lowers his voice and says it straight. Logistics isn't forgiving. Deadlines, breakdowns, heavy loads. You'll need men for this sooner or later. For a second, it hits me like deja vu. He warned me about this before. I force a laugh. Brush it off. That's outdated thinking, Marcus. We're proving you wrong every day. He doesn't argue, doesn't raise his voice, just gives me this quiet look. Then he says, I hope you're right, and lets me walk away. Everything was running smooth and good for the first few days of the month, until a week later, I start feeling the heat. One of our biggest contracts, a retail chain distribution deal, cancels after 2 late deliveries. I tell the team it's just a fluke that will bounce back. Sometimes I catch small things, though. Rachel bickering over shifts, Alicia mixing up dispatch schedules, Marcy freezing up whenever deadlines stacked. One driver even stormed out after being asked to cover a late run, shouting that she didn't sign up to be a workhorse. I laughed it off, told myself, every startup has drama. Women just needed time to adjust to being in charge. A week before launch, Marcus had actually pulled me aside. Hire one seasoned dispatcher, he said, tapping the schedule binder. Someone with 10 years under their belt. Even one veteran can stop the rookie mistakes. I laughed it off, told him, Alicia knows maps better than anyone. We don't need some washed-up guy babysitting her. He just sighed, muttered, scheduled break faster than trucks. I ignored it for half a second. His words echo in my head. Logistics isn't forgiving. But I shove the thought down as fast as it comes. I remind myself, every startup leads. We're just paying our dues. By midweek, the warning signs are piling up. 2 smaller clients delayed payments, citing service inconsistencies. One even hinted at pulling their contract unless we could guarantee on-time freight. Word must have gotten around because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with investor calls. They wanted answers. Why our margins were bleeding. Why deadlines were slipping. Why clients were restless. Finally, they call an emergency meeting. Their voices sharp. No applause. No friendly questions. Men seriously don't deserve to have these positions. They can't treat women right. They say, hire competent staff, including men behind the scenes, or we pull funding. You have 2 weeks. I straighten in my chair. Keep my voice steady. Men are toxic, unreliable, not in my company. The words feel powerful in the moment, but part of me wonders if I sound rehearsed. Marcus is there, too, at the far end of the table, silent. He doesn't push back this time, doesn't even speak, just shakes his head, gathers his notes, and leaves the room. What kept me up wasn't the freight. It was the thought of headlines. If we failed, it wouldn't just be my company. It would be proof that women couldn't handle the industry. No way would I let that happen. The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting in the warehouse, stood on a pallet by the loading dock like it was a stage, mic buzzing in my hand. My team looked drained, but I told myself they weren't tired. They were waiting for inspiration. I didn't mention investors or cancel contracts. That would only drag us down. Instead, I painted a picture. How we were pioneers rewriting history shift by shift. Every missed deadline was just a battle scar. Proof that we were fighting harder than anyone else. They said women couldn't handle this industry. I told them. But we're already proving them wrong every single day. Some of the women started nodding. One even wiped a tear like I'd given a TED Talk. When the applause finally came, it echoed off the warehouse walls like thunder. In that moment, I felt unstoppable again. Like if we just believed hard enough, the numbers would fix themselves. For a brief moment, I believed the worst was behind us. That this was the hardship we needed to forge us into legends. The very next week, the cracks I'd thought I fixed last Friday started widening. Rachel refused a long haul to Denver. Said the overnight hours were unsafe for a woman alone. I tried to explain the contract required it, but she folded her arms. Men get killed at truck stops, too. Why should I risk it? So, I paid double to reroute freight with a third-party carrier. Said we'd rotate shifts more fairly, knowing full well the run would just land on someone else's plate. Then the gossip started. I caught 2 drivers whispering in the break room about Alicia ditching her run to meet a guy. The team that once felt like a sisterhood was fraying into little camps. Defenders, critics, complainers, loyalists. Everyone had a side, and none of them were mine. Alicia started showing up late, distracted. One morning, she double-booked 2 drivers on the same route. Our client called furious, said their shipment was sitting in the wrong county. When I confronted her, she burst into tears, muttered something about being burnt out. I told her she was strong, that men cry weakness, but women cry resilience. Inside, I wondered how many more mistakes we could absorb before the investors noticed. Then there was Marcy. Steady, Dependable Marcy. Or so I thought. During a warehouse rush, she froze at the console, staring blankly at the orders piling up. The forklift operators were waiting on her dispatch, but she just stood there whispering, I can't. I can't. I had to step in, root everything myself. Later, I pulled her aside, told her not to worry. It happens to everyone, but I could see it in her eyes. She was drowning, and I was pretending it was rain. Marcus had warned me in passing, almost casual. Post every schedule where drivers can see it. Board app, whatever. No secrets, no whispers, otherwise they'll invent favoritism. I waved him off. We're not running some rigid boys club. My women trust me. Truth was, I believed that faith alone would hold the floor together. Still, I kept telling myself these were just individual hiccups. Men had meltdowns, too. I thought they'd just hide it behind bravado and cigars. At least my women were honest. Wasn't that healthier? The narrative always bent to fit my ideology, even as reality pulled the other way. Just when I thought those would be the worst of our issues, things exploded even further. One afternoon, I walked into the warehouse to find Rachel and Alicia screaming at each other by the loading dock. Rachel accusing her of slacking off for some guy. Alicia firing back that at least she wasn't hiding behind excuses about safety. Forklift drivers actually stopped mid-shift to watch like it was free entertainment. I had to step between them before it got physical, my voice cracking as I shouted for order. Later that day, Marcy pulled me aside, whispering that Rachel had been bad-mouthing me too. Said I was too soft to run the place, that the investors would replace me with a man within a year. I laughed it off in front of her, but the words drilled into my skull all night. By the end of that week, the floor looked emptier every day. Rachel finally quit outright, tossing her keys on my desk. Alicia ghosted the yard completely. One text saying she was done, then nothing. Marcy lasted the longest, but one morning she slipped her badge under my door with a note that just said, I can't. The sisterhood I'd built, the one I swore was bulletproof, was crumbling in silence and slammed doors. The next morning, the floor erupted, drivers refusing to load, shouting over favoritism and shifts. By the time I stepped in, it looked less like a company and more like Family Feud at Thanksgiving. I shouted about sisterhood, swore we wouldn't let male-style politics poison us. But deep down, I knew the truth. We didn't need men to divide us. We were doing it ourselves. Everything was in a total mess. I had to make a decision on what to do already. Later that night, I sat in my office, lights off, except for the glow of the monitor. That's when I heard the mop bucket squeak across the concrete. Our night janitor, an older guy named Luis, was making his rounds. He wasn't even my employee. He was an outsourced building contractor grandfathered in through the union deal when we leased the warehouse. I couldn't have fired him even if I wanted to. But that night, he stopped, leaned on the handle, and said, Rough week. I forced a laugh, told him every startup had bumps. He frowned, shook his head. Lady, I don't get what you're fighting against. Guys like me don't want the spotlight. We just move freight, fix what's broke, keep the floor running. I stayed quiet, and he went on. But freight, deadlines, engines, they don't care who's in charge. They just crush whoever can't carry it. Marcus' words flashed in my head. Logistics isn't forgiving. I snapped back. Women can carry it better than men. Luis only shrugged, pushing his mop again. Maybe, but proving a point won't move a load. Moving it does. I stood there, face burning. The way he said it, simple, unshakable, made my whole fight feel small. I muttered, doesn't mean he was right. The next morning, I stared at the clock until the hands blurred. The investors had given us 1 week to turn it around, and this was the last one. I knew there was only one move left. The move I swore I'd never make. I drove to Marcus's office, sat in the car for 5 minutes, gripping the wheel like it was a weapon. Walking and felt like swallowing glass. He looked up from his desk, calm as ever, like he'd been waiting for this day. I forced the words out like a confession. The company's on fire. We're hemorrhaging clients, trucks sitting idle. I need you to run it. I hated how small my voice sounded. Marcus didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He just nodded once, grabbed a notepad, and said, Then we start now. The first day was brutal. He gutted schedules, reassigned runs, called in contractors he trusted, guys with 20 years on the road, mechanics who could fix rigs blindfolded, dispatchers who didn't flinch under pressure. I stayed quiet, watching him move through the chaos like he'd never left. By midweek, the floor felt different. Routes straightened out, breakdowns fixed same day instead of lingering. Late shipments turned into early deliveries. Clients who'd been circling with threats started sending cautious thank yous. By Friday, even the investors had gone silent, which was the loudest relief of all. I walked the floor that night, engines humming like a heartbeat restored. The numbers were climbing back, the bleeding slowed, the fortress patched. But standing there, I knew the truth. The company wasn't running on my vision anymore. It was running on his system. A month later, the investors called me in for a closed-door meeting. No cameras, no reporters, just their flat voices cutting through the air. They say the turnaround worked. The company's stable again. For a second, I almost smile until the next words drop like a hammer. Marcus is staying with or without you. I blink, force myself to sit still. What do you mean? They don't soften it. Don't hedge. He runs operations now. You're valuable as a face, a story. But the company needs him. If you can't accept that, we'll move forward without you. My throat locks. I realize what they're really saying. I'm not the boss anymore. I'm the poster. Good for headlines, powerless in the engine room. I want to scream, flip the table, tell them it was my vision that built this place. But all I manage is a nod because walking out means watching it all thrive without me. And I can't stomach that. So I swallow my pride and play along. The investors smile, shake my hand, already looking past me. Marcus doesn't even come to this meeting. He's too busy keeping the freight moving. Later that evening, after another interview where I smiled and said, "My vision saved this company," I caught Marcus backstage, clipboard in hand, calm as ever. I snapped before I could stop myself. "You heard that, right? I'm still the boss. This company survived because of me." He didn't even look up from his notes, just said, "Steady as always, say it all you want. I don't care who gets the credit. I care that the freight moves." The words landed heavier than any investor threat, heavier than losing contracts. I wanted to scream at him, make him admit I was right, but he'd already walked away. Back to the trucks, like my outburst never even mattered. That night, I walked past the loading dock. Engines roar steady under his orders. The warehouse humming like a machine reborn. I stop, watching the system I built run perfectly without me. The truth sinks in, sharp as steel. The company is thriving, but not because of me. The next morning, I sat in my office drafting new hiring policy, the cursor blinking like a verdict. I didn't write no women. That would sound cruel, petty. I wrote, line haul and critical ops demand veterans only. Minimum 10 years field experience. No exceptions. I told myself it wasn't because the women failed. No, never that. I told myself it was mercy. Rachel shouldn't have to face Denver truck stops alone. Alicia shouldn't be breaking down in tears over dispatch boards. Marcy shouldn't be paralyzed by a console while forklifts wait. They didn't deserve work that brutal, that unforgiving. I kept typing, convincing myself with every line. This industry is savage. It eats the softest first. Better to keep women away from the front lines altogether. Leave the engines and deadlines to the men who can take the hit. But in the quiet between keystrokes, I knew the truth. I wasn't protecting them. I was admitting they couldn't carry it, and I couldn't bear to say it out loud. So, I signed it, sealed it, and called a policy. I won't hire women for these jobs again, not because they're incompetent, but because they don't deserve to suffer the way this work demands. But men do.